Call to order the workshop meeting of the Board of Directors, Vallecitos Water, March 13th at 4 p.m. If I could have our council, Nick, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Nick. Public comment area, person wishing to address?
Mr.
Roll call.
President?
Yes?
Sorry, roll call.
Roll call? Wait.
Thank you. Director Ellithart?
Here.
Director Evans?
Here.
Director Hernandez?
Here.
Director Spinella?
Here.
Director Martin?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Persons wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time.
I'll make a
Mr.
motion to adopt the agenda, if you don't mind.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm not trying to move too quick, am I? It'll be a long day. Are we ready now? Well, I already said it twice, so. It's public comment time. Mr. Hunsaker has an oral during public comment. Mr. Hunsaker, we have a new system, and it's new to me. So we do have a button here that 3 minutes and 5 seconds, you hit it and you disappear. Brand new system.
Actually, that's
Okay, is it a trap door or a laser?
No, you just go poof.
It's a
Transponder.
laser.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, Mike Hunsaker, Twin Oaks Valley Property Owners Association President. At a recent Finance Committee meeting, it was mentioned that we were being cut off essentially from desalinated water because of a dispute in some sort of pipeline issue. This has been going on for some months. I checked with the San Diego County Water Authority, and they said, well, it's been over a year that we've been cut off from desal water. And during the Finance Committee, it was mentioned that we were still being charged the full price for desal water. The San Diego County Water Authority also said it was about grouting and piping over 90 feet of piping. Why are we spending that sort of money on water we're not receiving? Which is correct? How long have we not been receiving desal water? How long have we been getting inferior water at inflated prices? And just what is causing the delay and reconnection of the water? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have some discussion, 2019 master plan.
We have another speaker. We have another speaker.
Another-
No, we have two on agenda item 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was oral.
My apologies.
Oh, I'm not the only one that can. Good, General Manager?
All right, so in the interest of time, I'll just turn it over to Rob and James, and they can introduce the item.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Pruitt. Good afternoon, President Martin, members of the board. Here to present to you here the 2018 Master Plan and Program Environmental Impact Reports. Just for clarification there, still calling it the 2018 Master Plan because that was the actual completion date of the Master Plan document and the draft EIR. Got a presentation here for you. You have seen this material before here. Here's kind of a listing of the workshops involved here. So on some occasions, you've seen this material multiple times. So we are going to attempt to move through this fairly quickly. Unless the board has any questions at that, if that does come to fruition, please feel free to put the brakes on us here and we'd be happy to explain everything at that point. Let's see here. This is for the master plan. We're going to talk about the master plan and program EIR, not necessarily get into the rate structure or the urban water management plan as much as we can help it. However, you will see some of the comment letters did delve into the urban water management plan, and so you'll see some discussion in there as we respond to some of those comments. So this is the objectives for the workshop today here. I will start this process off here, just basically setting out the purpose and the goals of the master plan. And then I'm going to turn it over to Scott Lynch of Black and Beach to talk about the master plan itself, go through the process through the capital improvement program. I'll wrap up here, talk about the cost estimates, and then I'll then give it to Mr. Michael Page of Recon. He'll talk about the CEQA review process, and then he'll introduce the public comments and our responses to comments, and then I'll kind of take it from there as we get into a couple of the more touchy comment letters that we received during the public comment period for the program EIR. And then I'll wrap up here with talking about our proposal here for the master plan and program EIR adoption and for potentially scheduling that. So real quick here, the purpose of the master plan here, this is our document. This is our document that gives us the tools to anticipate and plan for growth. It's going to take the land use information that was provided by the land use agencies, such as the County of San Diego and the cities here that we serve. And we're going to process that and determine what pipelines, reservoirs, infrastructure in general that we need to accommodate that projected demands. One other keynote real quick is the master plan also evaluates water resources and supply alternatives here. You see the listing I have here. We're already doing a lot of these, such as the conservation, desalination, and agency connections. And for groundwater, we're currently evaluating that. So getting into the land use portion at this point, this is where I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scott Lynch. You probably heard me talk enough about it here, so I'll get a new voice up and a new face up so you can listen to them for a little while. Scott Lynch is the regional planning leader for Black and Beach. He's been involved in this master plan pretty much from its inception here. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Rob. So as Rob noted on the land use, there are 5 different entities that do the land use planning and permitting of new development in the region, in the district's service area. So it's the city of San Marcos, who's by far the majority of the district service area, a little bit of city of Escondido, the county of San Diego, city of Carlsbad, and the city of Vista. So we obtained all their land use information early on as part of the process. And we also use SANDAG because they are the regional entity that provides population estimates, and we'll show you a little bit later how those came into play as part of the planning process. So on the duty factors, what we did was, first goal was really try to figure out, well, how much water are we using, and to break that down by different land use categories using that land use data. We took all the VWD's meter accounts from 2008 through 2014, so a pretty extensive data set. We also looked at wastewater flow monitors that the district has installed in this system to look at wastewater flows. And we did a comparison between the water, so how much is being used, how much is going into the sewers, how much is lost, non-revenue, how much is outdoor irrigation, to come up with those duty factors to figure out both how much water is each customer type using, as well as how much wastewater is going into the system. And those were adopted by the board in September of 2016. Just to show you that, it's a lot of details, but those are all the different land use categories they came up with. We break them down into different densities for the residential side, because you have different numbers of people and different size units and houses and things like that affect how much water and wastewater use. This table is showing you a little bit of a progression between what was used in the 97, the 2002, the 2008, and the 2018 master plan. So again, more historical data being applied as you go on, get better records, adjust for conservation, refinement of the data, and that. And on the other same side, this is on the sewer factor side. So we have the same customer land use types, both for water and wastewater, what their duty factors are. And these form the basis of our planning going forward. So for the demand projection, so what are we doing in the future? What we first looked at is what are the ultimate demands. Those again are established by those duty factors. We sort of assume that what we're doing today is in the future. They're calculated for all the different parcels and the boundaries. We total those demands, and then that kind of represents what the ultimate water and wastewater flows are for the district based on the projected future land use. We then use the population projection to estimate in 5-year increments how the district would grow out. So we don't have land use by time period, we just have future land use. So we use the population as sort of the growth of population to sort of project those interim years, which we need to develop 5, 10, 15-year CIPs for the district. So the population projection that we use to develop that phasing is listed here. Again, that was based on the SANDAG data for the district's area. By phase 5 or by 2036, SANDAG doesn't project beyond 2036. They had a population of 122,000, with the population in what we call phase 1, 2016, 2020 was around 106,000. So we kind of progressed through the years based on the SANDAG data. So for comparison purposes, we also wanted to look at what's the district been doing historically demand-wise as well as in the future. So this table shows you for each of the different master plans on the water side, all the way back to 1975 through 2018, what the existing demand was at the time and what the projected demand was at the time. And I think one of the things to note too, obviously, is between 2008 and 2018, there was a pretty good drop in the existing demand just due to long-term conservation kicking in, as well as shorter-term conservation, since we had drought periods starting really since 2000 almost until this year, most years. And so that you see that, but you also see the projected ultimate demand both going down at times, but then going up at times too. And the reason sometimes it goes down is because you have more conservation, but sometimes you see that the projection going up because you have additional land use changes. So back in 1975, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen that document, but there was probably a lot more open space land use. Whereas now in 2018, when we look at the ultimate, there's very little open space. All the different land use agencies have basically, allocated out or defined those areas as what the future development's going to be. So you have a lot more projected development now in the future than you did in the past. So I hope that makes sense. Same thing on the wastewater side. It's very similar story. Obviously, the more water we use, the more of it's indoors. The land use changes causes projections to go up over time too. So that's why you kind of see some higher projected flows in the past, a little bit less in the future, but still kind of growing a little bit more in the last master plan just due to land use changes. And there was a pretty significant land use change too between 2008 and 2018, just in terms of how much was developed, projected to be developed. So that's kind of a big driver. So as far as how we size the facilities and determine when facilities are needed, new pipes, we use it's pretty standard design criteria. This is pretty standard for most agencies, not just in terms of what the criteria is, but the actual numbers too. So peaking curves, those are important. Both for water and wastewater, because we don't use water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. We use more of it in the summer. We use more of it certain times of the day. Same thing on the wastewater side. So we use those peaking curves to help us to establish the facility sizing as well, so that we can meet the peak needs of the customers. And this is on the same thing on the design criteria for the wastewater side, and those are the peaking curves we use for the wastewater. So we do use hydraulic models, different one for water, different one for wastewater. We use those to help us to figure out once we've loaded the demands and the flows into those models, we then use those to figure out, using that design criteria, where the system needs improvements, where it needs replacements of facilities due to lack of sizing, where it needs new facilities because of new demands are now introduced into the system. And for the, we use it on a time-step basis too, so we both look at existing condition to try to calibrate, make sure we're reflecting what's happening in the system, and we also look at ultimate, and we look at those time periods too to help us identify improvement needs through time. There's a model illustration of one of the models that we use. I know it's exciting. Capital improvement program. So once we have all that, we have all these improvement needs we've identified. Using that model, we do kind of go back and forth in the model, make sure we're doing things right. We do look at different options, which is the most cost-effective approach to solve a certain improvement need, whether it's more pumping, more storage, can we solve it with a pipeline? So we do a lot of those kind of things. And ultimately what we come out with is, with all those improvements, that helps define what the capital improvement program, or what defines a capital improvement project that feeds into the program. So these maps here show both the water and the wastewater systems, and the pipelines that are colored in not purple, green and purple in different colors, those represent the improvement needs, both in the water and the wastewater system, representing different periods in time. We'll step through those a little bit right now. So in total, we had 11 water pipeline projects, 10 reservoir or storage projects, 7 pump station projects. Not all of them necessarily new, but sometimes they might be a replacement of an existing one, I should note. 25 sewer projects, 1 lift station replacement, a parallel of the land outfall will be needed, and then we also identified how much more wastewater treatment the district was going to need to meet the future wastewater flows. So on the water master plan side, the different reservoirs, we basically for all the different reservoir needs, we identified what pressure zone they're serving in, what the size was needed, and then what phase. Phase 1 being near term or short term, phase 5 being ultimate, so I think 2035 and beyond, and then phase 2, 3, and 4 are intermediate phases, 2 being I think 2020 to 2025 in 5-year increments. So that kind of gives you a summary of those. Pump stations, same thing. We had some pump stations that I don't think there was any new pump stations, but they were all needing just expansion, so bigger pumps to serve future demands or flows that would be higher. And then pipelines, same thing here. They're different pipes just needed for different phases depending on the existing capacity or serving new areas that didn't have any facilities. This is the southern portion of the district showing you the water CIP. So there's a mix of pipelines, storage, as well as pump station needs in the south. This is the central area. A few more needed, including a couple of large pipelines in the north and kind of middle area of the middle. And then this is the northern area where we needed quite a bit of more pipelines, as well as some pump stations and tanks as that area starts to grow and develop. So on the wastewater side, again, mostly sewer projects, and there was the 1 lift station project. Pretty good mix between needing it short term and then a few spaced out between phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 over time. In the south, those are the sewer ones we were needing. Probably the biggest one is the continuation of the San Marcos Interceptor sewer to provide additional capacity. That's a major trunk line for the district where a lot of the district's flows come to. Some additional ones then also in the north and the central areas. I think that Vallecitos doesn't really have sewer systems in the farther northern part. Most of that is not on sewer septic systems. So, and then the last one are the land outfall. This one's a really challenging one to deal with. It's very complicated outfall for typical land outfall or ocean outfall. We divided it into different sections, try to look at the capacity kind of varies between sections, whether it's siphoning or not. And so we kind of broke it down into five distinct phases or sections. And then we looked at the phasing needs. So one of the sections, what we call gravity D, which is more towards the, is that the downstream? Downstream end, right? Yeah. Downstream end's a little short of capacity in a lot of the areas, more in the short term, and then some of the other ones, different phasing, different sections. And that's just a summary of the entire length, and you can see that's kind of phased out with the purple gravity D being in the short term, and then the other ones kind of intermediate based on their specific needs. So,
Could you
yes.
stop and give a little more detail on that if you go back to the previous one? Gravity section D replaced 7,900 feet of gravity sewer. And that's closer to the ocean, is that what I see on the next one?
Yeah, that's the pink one down there at the bottom. So it's a pretty long section, so it goes all the way down to the treatment plant, basically, or right close to it.
And what's the blue?
The one to the east, or more in the middle? Because there's two different blue
More in the
ones.
middle, more in the middle.
Okay, that is I think that's the siphon A, the 18,000 feet. It was a 30-inch line that needs to be paralleled.
Now, when you call it a gravity section, what does that mean?
So gravity means it's flowing downhill.
With gravity should be almost the entire.
Yeah,
way.
but there's sections. What happens is there are sections because of the topography of the land where we're siphoning. So what that means is the pipe's probably going flat or even up gradient to match the land, because it's a cost factor because we don't want it to be too deep. So on a siphon, basically what happens, it means it's full of water all the time. It's not pressure. It's not being pumped like a water system, but the water. Because water's kind of needs to have, water wants to do this, but your pipe's doing this kind of.
Right.
So some parts the water is flowing free fall, another portion is just constantly under water all the time. So those are the trickier ones because it's difficult to access them. They're full of water, so then they tend to be a little more problematic. They're a little more expensive design and construction because you want them to be. They have to be really tight and pretty good shape because your ability to maintain them is minimal.
Thank you.
So, and there's a few sections, if they back up, then part of the challenge is trying to do the hydraulics when it does siphon or not. Is the model we have probably isn't the best one for this. It's okay, and we tried it different ways to really make sure we had it covered. It's there's a lot of uncertainties when you look at an outfall like this and trying to project. But we know long term it's going to be needed to be paralleled or at least increased in capacity in sections. So.
Thank you.
Okay. So on the wastewater treatment.
I have one more question. Sorry.
Yes.
Director
Yeah.
Elefant.
I had a question,
Right.
I don't know if maybe more for James, but do the various regional potable reuse projects, would they potentially affect the need for the outfall project?
So we actually looked at that, Director Elthorpe, on several things. The recycled water projects do not help the outfall projects at all because in the middle of a wet weather event, you're not producing recycled water, not using recycled water. Potentially, if there's a full water reuse project, that can, but really the peaking factors are the main issue here, and we're fairly undersized even currently, and then of course in the future. But staff is keeping an eye on it and working with, because some of these sections have partners, Carlsbad and Buena, so it's not all, the burden of payment is not 100% on Vallecitos. So we're working with our partners on how we can kind of upgrade this pipeline in the future.
Thank you.
So on the wastewater treatment side, there are a few different, two different main drivers on the wastewater. There's the solids treatment, which is the solid component of wastewater, and the liquids. Now, for most agencies, those are the same, but with the Meadowlark plant, what happens is the Meadowlark plant does not have solids capacity handling, so when the Meadowlark plant treats the water, pulls out, creates that good water, sends that off to be recycled by Carlsbad Liebenhain, but the solids have to go down to the Encina treatment plant where they dispose of them out through their solids processing and outfall. So that's why you see two different numbers, and those capacities and the fees that are associated with that with Encina do vary. So we had to break those out, recalculate them, and figure that component out. based on the future projections. So that's what this slide is showing you, is the different costs and capacities that we calculated for those. You're taking over now?
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
So give a little bit of background here on how we come up with the capital improvement costs here, especially on the pipelines, the pump stations, and the reservoirs here. The first slide is showing that the cost estimates that you're about to see, these are, I'll call them all-in costs. This is, or cradle-to-grave costs, or any other cliche I could think of. This will basically take a project from its inception. It's designed to take it through all the components here, including planning, design, construction management, until it's actually in the ground, done, and accepted here. We take these unit costs from a variety of sources here. Obviously, our primary one is what are we seeing out there actually in the field? What are those construction costs? We're also taking the unit cost from the 2008 master plan here, as well as the engineering news record inflation factor, making sure that all makes sense. There's also a scaling factor that we attach to the more complicated projects, or the projects that we find we can get a larger economy of scale that have a smaller scaling factor, so that we can adjust those unit costs accordingly, just depending on the project. And these unit costs, they're applied to all the CIP projects to generate planning level and budgetary cost level estimates. So these show the cost estimates here for water pipelines, sewer pipelines, as well as force main sewer pipelines that we utilize in the 2018 master plan. For water storage for our tanks and reservoirs, approximately $1.39 per gallon. And then pump stations, we assume here we need about $1,100 per gallon per minute of pumping capacity here, except for one particular pump station here where we already have it built. All we have to do is drop in new pumps, and we're assuming 150,000 gallons for each new pump. I'm going to skip ahead here a few slides. I had some slides on each project and its components here, but just trying to save some time. You've already seen those numbers before. Those have not changed. So I'm going to take you straight to this slide here, which is just the estimates, showing all the different components from the water and the wastewater side. Taking all this together, the total cost estimate for the capital improvement program is of almost $253 million. And that's paid through a variety of sources. Obviously, that'll come through capacity fees. Portions of these too are also going to be contributed from development projects. So it's not strictly capacity fees here. This is everything included. The good news is we don't have to write the check today. A lot of these projects are phased out. In fact, most of the projects are phased out, and even the majority of them we're not going to need to worry about until at least 20 years from now, and probably longer. As you see, a lot of the CIP load is backlogged beyond 2036. So with that, we'll kind of switch gears. We'll start talking about our program EIR and that process. So what I'll do is I'll invite Mr. Michael Page. Michael is the principal and also the environmental division leader at Recon here in San Diego. He's been part of this project ever since we've gotten the program EIR started. So without further ado, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. So we did start this process back in 2014, working with Vallecitos and with Black & Veatch, and we also didn't start from scratch. We started with the 2008 master plan, and it was a 2011 program EIR. And then we went from there, looking at all the changes that had occurred over the past 10 years on that. And we were doing so at a program level with a program EIR, meaning that this was very much a 30,000-foot look at things. And it also looked at the cumulative impacts of all the projects over the many years. So in the future, each individual project will be looked at in reference to the program EIR to determine if the nature of the impacts and mitigation are in line with what we looked at, and if anything additional is required at that time. And so it includes an overall, basically, as the master plan provides kind of a roadmap to all your water, wastewater, reclaimed water improvements over the years, the program EIR provides a roadmap for the environmental review process in conformance with CEQA over the coming years as well, going hand in hand with that. We also looked at a number of alternatives, and yeah, and I think that, and also throughout we were looking at ways to reduce or avoid impacts, so working hand in hand with the engineers on the project. Am I advancing? Nope, all right, other way. Got it. Okay, so the key issues that we looked at are here before you on the slide. And again, we're looking at them on a district-wide basis, so, or in the case of certain things like air quality or greenhouse gas, climate change, that's more of a regional or even a global issue. But back to the district level, the biological resources, cultural resources, the geology soils didn't really change in the past 10 years, so that there wasn't a whole lot new to say about that. Hydrology, water quality, and other things we updated and looked at anew this time. And in particular, I'd say the land use and planning, that's something that over the years does change. And so as Robert had mentioned, we looked at the latest land use designations by all the land use authority agencies. Okay, so the official start of the public review process or the public involvement process of the environmental document began in November of 2017 when we released what's called a Notice of Preparation, or NOP, and that was circulated throughout the community and advertised for 45 days, and we received 9 comment letters in response to that. And unlike the comments and responses we'll discuss a little bit later, those comments we reviewed and considered and addressed those through the program EIR, but we did not prepare specific responses to each letter. And the letters that we received, 2 letters from Latham and Watkins representing the Golden Door, and the issues that they said they wanted to see in the EIR or to point out were public outreach. They wanted to see more of that. Had a lot of questions and concerns about the urban water management plan and the supply deficit projected in that, and then listed the issues you see there, which are just some of the issues that CEQA requires, and so all of those were addressed. The State Water Resources Control Board provided instructions on applying for state revolving fund grants for some of the future projects, and the State Department of Toxic Substances Control sent what was pretty much a form letter or boilerplate letter we see a lot with just reminders on the various regulations that need to be complied with. County of San Diego Department of Planning and Land Use, or now it's Planning and Development Services, was reminding us of their watershed protection efforts, the DPW road work and permitting issues that they have, and also the vector control people. LAFCO, just wanted to make sure that we were looking at everything within the sphere of influence for the district. And then finally, the San Diego Archaeology Society just requested a copy of the EIR and to be informed of the process. And actually, finally, was the City of San Marcos. Just wanted to make sure that all their general plan amendments and specific plans were considered, which they were. And as Robert mentioned, there hadn't been any changes of those since we started the update process. Okay, so that was back in November 2017 into January of 2018. We spent most of the rest of 2018 doing the analysis, doing the technical studies, working with Scott and Black and Veatch to refine the project description. And that led us to the release of the public document, or the draft program environmental impact report, this past October. And that ran October 22nd through December 7th, 2018. When the entire document was circulated. In the old days, that meant putting it in the libraries and sending out hard copies. We still had a few hard copies on hand, but most people now go online to the website and can review or download and print all the documents from the website. We had 7 comment letters that were received. And that included the standard one we get from the Office of Planning and Research at the Governor's Office. And that really just confirmed that we had complied with the requirements to send copies up to Sacramento, and they were distributed to a number of state agencies. Caltrans sent us a letter, and it was reminding us of the various basically duties that Caltrans had and requirements that the district would have applying to Caltrans if there were any impacts to any Caltrans facilities, specifically the pipelines that were crossing I-5, beneath I-5. We did, oh, and I should mention the format of these slides here. If it's in black, that just highlights what our response was to them. The blue are the points that they raised. So let's see. We basically said that we would, oh, question?
Quick question, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the land outfall, when it goes under 5, is currently of the size necessary? Obviously, if we're not gonna do any work to it to enlarge it, it must have been built for a much larger.
That is my understanding, that the response was that we would not be going beneath I-5 and would not therefore need a permit from Caltrans. But
how big is that pipe?
I believe the pipeline itself there, President Martin, is a 54-inch there, but it has a liner in it, which makes the effective diameter a 48-inch pipe going under the freeway.
And that's large enough, obviously, to take the waste from all 3 agencies that are involved?
Yeah, as planned, yes.
Thank you. Director Elfar?
Yeah, I just want to comment, that's some uncharacteristic foresight. Just in my experience.
Yeah. Thank you.
okay, and so with the other Caltrans facility, SR-78, there will be potential impacts to that, and we acknowledge that if and when there would be, that we would apply for the proper encroachment permits. Okay, the County of San Diego sent a letter similar to the Caltrans one, just saying that any work within county right-of-way would also require coordination and possible right-of-way permitting. And also wanted to make sure that we coordinated with them on any of their county projects, specifically in the Escondido Creek Preserve area. And trails were an issue that they were also concerned with. The tribal government of the Rincon Band of Luiseno Indians just requested that the cultural resources study be performed, which it was performed, and we provided them with a copy with that. And they also asked that they be included in the AB 52 consultation, which was also performed back in June of 2018, which AB 52 requires government-to-government consultation on anything that the tribe is of interest to the tribe for traditional cultural resources. Okay, also a letter from the San Diego Archaeology Society, Inc., who we see those on just about every EIR that we send out, and said they just wanted to make sure that the County Historic Site Board was provided input with this or given information, and basically they wanted more information on historic structures, and so within the service area, and that was added to the final EIR. It was something that had not been in the draft. Also about the indirect impacts to archaeological and historic resources, the potential for that. We basically said we'd avoid direct impacts, and they brought up the issue of indirect, and we said, okay, that makes sense. And then finally, they wanted to fine-tune the mitigation measure that was already in the document regarding potential impacts to cultural resources. They were fairly minor revisions, but we made those as well, and it was to be consistent with the mitigation measures that other agencies were putting forth. So I had the easy part. I'm going to turn this back over to Robert to address the last 2 letters that we received.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael said here, the last 2 letters, I'm going to kind of go through these a little bit more point by point here, because you'll see here the last 2 letters were a little bit more pointed in their comments. And so I'll kind of go over what some of the comments were, how we're responding back to them here. So the first one here of Latham and Watkins there, who's representing the Golden Door. First comment is, The master plan is based on data from 2014 or earlier and is therefore outdated. Well, the reality is there have been no agency general plan changes since our June 30th, 2014 cutoff date. We've incorporated everyone's land use general plans. That hasn't changed. There's actually only been one major development that was actually been approved since 2014, which is the Newland Sierra project. And this project approval has been rescinded per Latham and Watkins' very own correspondence to us later on. Before I get too far here, I also should point out, and you're going to hear this from me probably a couple more times here before the evening's done, the 2018 master plan does not include the Newland Sierra project because it was not an approved land use as of June 30th, 2014. So I just want to clarify that for everybody. Next one, Latham and Watkins comments here. The program EIR fails to consider water supply deficit projections from the urban water management plan. So, a few things on this here. First of all, absolutely correct. The master plan does not address supply sufficiency. That's not the job of the master plan. That's the job of the urban water management plan. So the urban water management plan is going to determine supply sufficiency here. And by the way, our 2015 urban water management plan did not project a supply deficit. I know I've been at this podium here several times to talk to you about this here, to assure you here that yes, water supply is found to be perfectly fine for the district. I know there's a lot of, I shouldn't say that there, I should say we know that there's members of the public that are very concerned about our water supply here. So what I've done here is presented a table which uses information from both the master plan and the 2015 urban water management plan to kind of set the record straight here. So if you call from the 2015 urban water management plan, the county water authority has reserved a specific amount of supply here for each of the districts, including ours. That's what's shown on the bottom row there, is what they're projecting to have available in million gallons per year, each of the 5-year phases. And what I've done on the row just above that is take the master plan, the 2018 master plan's projected demands from the information that we've been given from Sandag in their Series 12 data. And as you can see here, we have, starting in 2020, a projected surplus of water available. So we're using, or plan to use approximately 700 million gallons a year less than what the county water authority projects to have available for us. And as you can see, as we get later and later in time, that surplus grows. So the concerns here about water supply for this district, I'm trying to put to rest. Going to the next comment here. The master plan cannot plan for facilities to serve new unplanned development projects or unplanned agricultural uses. And our response to that is, it doesn't, period. So the vast majority here of the Newland Sierra site is actually zoned per the county's 2011 general plan update as rural lands. That is how the 2018 master plan looks at that data. It doesn't look at it from the development. It looks at it from what the land use is and what that land use typically uses on for like a water demand in our system. So, in other words, the master plan is accounting for the actual planned land use. Just a kind of a side note here, the master plan itself is using what is zoned per the land use agencies. However, the master plan also gives us tools for planning for growth that densifies above and beyond what could be in the master plan. So in an instance of a Newland Sierra, for instance, which is not included in the master plan, we can still plan for it, for instance, when the county asks us for a water supply assessment, because the master plan gives us the duty factors and the tools that we need to project demands here and determine if we have sufficient supply, along with the urban water management plan. One more comment letter, I believe, here from Latham and Watkins, actually a few more here. The master plan and program EIR includes scant information about the details and impacts of the capital improvement program. Yeah, the program EIR, it's a 30,000 foot level document. It's meant to do an overview of the different capital improvement projects. We don't have enough information at this point to know exactly where the projects are located, what impacts they could occur. When the individual capital improvement projects are ready to go through their planning stage and design stage, that's when a tiered CEQA document will look at those and address such impacts. Another comment letter here from Latham and Watkins was the program EIR fails to analyze fire safety and urban decay impacts here. This kind of ties into the claim here that we have a supply deficiency, which we don't. So on that there, we've basically stated master plan is using accurate water demand projections. Urban water management plan has already stated here, determined that water supply is going to be available. Therefore, no impacts will occur. And then last, but of course not least here, Mr. Michael Hunsaker. Mr. Hunsaker had a very generous comment letter. When I say generous, I mean it was 20 pages long. So I'm gonna do my best to go through a lot of the comments here, but there was a lot of information on it. If I missed something, I'm sure Mr. Hunsaker is gonna let me know. So I'll start with the first comment here. First comment is growth has outstripped all projections, and so the new master plan is already out of date. So the first point I wanted to make here is we need to have a cutoff date for this master plan. If we continue to move that date and include more information, we'll be up here forever. We need to set a date, stick to it, and move on from there. The good news is, as I said before, no agency general plans have been updated since June 30th, cutoff date here. So the master plan is certainly not out of date from that aspect. As far as the Sandag population projections here, we look at the Sandag information we used here, the range here that Sandag had for population projections between 2015 and 2020, it ranges from about 98,000 to 110,000 within our district. Our current population estimate at the end of 2018 is about 105,741. So what we're finding is Sandag's population projections, at least for our districts, we're not finding those out of date. We're finding those pretty much dead on. Next comment here, wastewater treatment capacity is inadequate to handle larger rain events here, such as the February 28, 2017 rain event here. So the key word here is on the treatment capacity. There was a wastewater spill on this February 28 date, but this wasn't because of treatment. This is just because of a pipeline break. So it's not related.
Got a quick question.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, if you go back to the previous slide. No land use agency general plans have been updated since June 30th, 2014. However, many jurisdictions, or some of the jurisdictions in there, have done general plan amendments since that time.
So we've had specific plans here, but like I said, the only major amendment that was approved and it's since rescinded was the Newland Sierra project by the County of San Diego. That's the only major one that we've seen since 2014. The rest that we've seen here, we're talking minor little amendments, dozen homes, subdivisions.
Quick question on the project directly across from the university. New City. That's had general plan amendments.
Are you talking about the Rancho Tesoro development?
No, I'm talking about the apartments.
North City.
North City, sorry. North City.
Just north of the university.
By Urge.
Urge Cafe.
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
yeah. So,
apartments in there.
okay, so, yeah, that university district, yeah, that was approved prior to the June 30th, 2014 cutoff date.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And they've had minor amendments, but it's really shifting the development. The overall footprint has stayed within percentages.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so back to the wastewater treatment issue. 2014 wastewater flows from the district here averaged 7.5 million gallons per day. But our solids handling capacity, as Scott pointed out earlier, we have a capacity of 10.5 million gallons a day. So we are not seeing an inadequate treatment capacity at this point here. We're seeing we're actually under 75%. Next comment letter here from Mr. Hunsaker. Density bonuses render growth projections that utilize zoning as their basis inadequate. The reality is that, first of all, density bonuses, projects with density bonuses are a very small portion of our overall portfolio here. They're not a major player. When we actually do have developments with density bonuses, like I said before, our master plan gives us the tools to basically plan for these here. So while the master plan is going to stick to the approved density and land use, if there is a density bonus that does come up with a project, we'll use the master plan tools to perform a water and sewer study that'll study the project-specific impacts. Another comment letter, an apartment will use 200 gallons per day of water, while a single-family home is assumed to use 250 gallons per day. We agree with the first part here. Your typical apartment here probably uses about 200 gallons per day, but a single-family unit will use approximately 500 gallons per day. This is important because I'll come back to this in a future comment. 500 gallons per day, by the way, is equivalent to 1 water EDU. Next comment there, most large developments are in the 50 residential units per acre category. We're not seeing that. What we're seeing is we have a handful of large developments that start to rival that range, but when you average all multifamily and mixed-use development here, we're more like 12 units per acre in this district. Soon marijuana will be the only viable crop due to water price increases and will consume significant resources. We haven't seen any evidence to support either statement yet. Next comment here, water meters are often only read every 2 to 3 months, with the monthly in between being interpolated for billing purposes here. That's not what's happening here. We read meters monthly and we bill on those reads monthly, period. Next comment letter, where does additional water come from for the new Sierra project? So actually this question can be answered here by looking at the water supply assessment for the new Sierra project that was performed back in November of 2016. I don't know if I've mentioned this or not, but the Newland Sierra project is not included in the 2018 master plan because it was not approved land use as of June 30th, 2014. Okay. to kind of wrap up here, Davia Village. Davia Village, just to kind of set the table, is about a 400 apartment unit development right down the road on the corner of Bingham and Vallecitos de Oro. No, Armorlight, I'm sorry. Got my streets mixed up. Okay, so according to the comment, Davia Village, which is now called the San Marcos, they should have 42 2-inch meters for a development of that size here. But it only has 11. This means the project only pays 26% of the fees that it should. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of take you through Mr. Hunsaker's calculations that arrive there. So first of all, a 2-inch meter has a capacity of 8 EDUs. We agree with that statement. That's correct. Average high-density apartment uses 200 gallons per day, as we mentioned in an earlier statement. We agree. Therefore, each apartment uses 0.8 EDUs. That's where we're diverging. Keep in mind here, an EDU equals 500 gallons per day. It looks like Mr. Hunsaker might have potentially used the sewer EDU. A sewer EDU is 250 gallons per day. A water EDU is 500 gallons per day. I'll come back to this here. Let me finish the calculation process. Therefore, a 2-inch meter can serve 10 apartments, which obviously, once the math goes, it goes. And so since the project has 416 units, it should have 42 meters. So if we do some revisions to Mr. Hunsaker's point here, 2-inch meter equals 8 EDUs. We said before we agree with that. We agree that average high-density apartment uses 200 gallons per day. We plug in now 500 gallons per day per EDU. Each apartment will use 0.4 EDUs, not 0.8 EDUs. Therefore, a 2-inch meter can serve 20 apartments. This is Mr. Hunsaker's arguments, I'm just correcting the math. And according to that logic, you should have 21 meters, not 11. So now let me get into our side. What is Davia Village actually paid for? So first of all, they have 12 2-inch domestic meters, not 11. They also have 4 irrigation meters on site, and these meters average about equivalent about a half of a 2-inch capacity there. So you get about 2-inch meters capacities worth from them. This project site also inherited 2¼ domestic meters worth of capacity that was already at the site before it was leveled and then they built the apartments. As you know, once you purchase water, it stays with the land. And so 2¼ domestic meters worth of capacity stays with that land and was inherited by this project. So your total capacity for that project there was 16¼ meters, 2-inch meters worth of capacity. It's short of the 21 meters worth of capacity that Mr. Hunsaker would like to see the project have. As far as the 16¼ meters capacity, we're good with that. We're comfortable with this capacity for a couple of reasons, especially. First of all, this is a brand new development. They're going to be putting in the state-of-the-art fixtures here, low-use water fixtures, and also the size of these apartments too. We have apartments that, for the most part in this development, are under 1,000 square feet here. We would expect them to use a lot less water than a typical multifamily. For instance, those like the Rancho Tesoro, where those monstrosities run in the 1,500 to 1,800 square feet range per dwelling unit for these. These are much smaller units than that, thus we expect to have much less water usage out of those and therefore need less capacity than the average multifamily unit. In the terms, if we come to the event that we find their usage exceeds what they paid for, we have the right to go back to them and say, you owe us more money here for additional EDUs. So just because we've set that, doesn't mean we have to stay there. We can always go back and get more if we find that their usage exceeds what they've purchased.
And from the engineering committee, you may recall, we talked about different fixture counts. So, for example, just because a unit's not a unit across the board, senior housing units may have much smaller fixture counts. So you cannot just blanketly put one blanket over every single type of unit. We have to look at what the project is actually building. So a senior housing project is going to have less meters per the number of units than, or student housing than a luxury apartment complex that has pools and outdoor grass facilities and so on. So those are taken into consideration. So just having units and dividing them to figure out meters is kind of a falsehood.
Okay, so that wraps up the comment letters. So just to wrap up and talk about finalizing the program EIR, responses have been composed for all these comment letters that we received during the public review. The changes here that we stated will be made in the final program EIR. The Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, or the MMRP, that's been completed, and that would be approved by the board as part of the final program EIR. So as far as the board actually taking actions here to certify the program EIR and approve the master plan, depending on the board's comfort level, if you're comfortable, what we would like to do is come back to you next month, hold the public hearing to receive public comments, and then ask the board to certify the final program EIR and ask the board to approve the 2018 master plan. I do apologize for condensing this presentation there, so much there in the sake of time here, but I'd love to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I just like to say I think you did an excellent report, and we've gone over this many times before, so thank you for condensing it. And questions, Director Elefar?
Yeah, it's not a question, but I'd just like to commend staff for the outstanding presentation. It was extremely factual, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Sinella?
Just out of curiosity, because I appreciated the presentation too, but there's, other than the kind of the boilerplate correspondence that we got from the different agencies and Rincon and some of the other ones, there was really just two parties that really submitted some questions. What other sort of engagement or dialogue have we had with those two parties as it pertains to trying to clarify their questions that they have, or maybe better explain or clarify our position?
I can kind of answer that two different ways here. When it comes to Latham and Watkins, who's representing the Golden Door, we've had a little bit of correspondence, not necessarily directly on the master plan here, but more in regards to Newland Sierra and their concerns and their public records requests. They requested a lot of our information here on that. That's kind of the extent that our correspondence with Latham and Watkins includes. In regards to Mr. Hunsaker's letter, we haven't done anything particular to date. That said, I plan on going to the Twin Oaks Valley sponsor group, which is the county endorsed group for the area. I will be doing this next week, and I'll be putting together just a short presentation talking about not just the master plan, but also my department's work in development services and how we basically manage development.
So that's good to hear. What is that exactly? And does that group, Twin Oaks Valley Sponsor Group, do they have a board of directors?
Yes, they do. They have a 7-member board. I believe there might still be a couple of vacant seats. Unfortunately, they had a pretty large turnover in their board when their terms expired, I think, at the end of December. So there's been a few new appointees, but I think there's still a couple of seats left over. They meet the third Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock.
At 7, okay, so it's during it's typically after our board meetings, sounds like,
Yes.
depending on when we end, right? So I'd like to perhaps attend that one or one in the future soon. And I'd hope maybe some folks from our public relations department could do that as well. I noticed one of the comments there, I believe, from the legal firm was that they wanted some more public outreach, and so I'm glad to hear that we're doing that, especially with one of the parties that's most interested and submitted some, at least through their representative, submitted some questions. I would like to do more than just kind of a master plan outreach with them, more of a kind of a public outreach in general, and tell them a little bit more about the district and all the things that we do and how kind of the system works. I think they'd probably benefit from that and might be of interest in that. So I think that's something that might be even beyond, our engineering team, but our public relations team and perhaps even some board members.
Yeah, if I can make a proposal here, yes. What if I brought that up Wednesday to them to see if they would be more interested in kind of a broad Vallecitos presentation here? One that would be more driven from our public services personnel, because my presentation I'm going to make is going to be very focused on the master plan and then my department, and basically how development's handled in general for some of those questions.
Okay.
I do have two speakers. General Manager Perone.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and to follow up on Director Sinella's question, Chris Robbins has reached out to both the Twin Oaks Valley Sponsor Group and Mr. Hunsaker, I forget the name of your group, the Twin Oaks.
Twin Oaks Valley Sponsor Group.
Oh.
Twin Oaks
Property
Valley
Owners?
Property Owners Association.
So there's two groups up there. One is formally appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and the other is kind of an informal group. Chris reached out to both groups and hasn't heard back from either, offering to do a general overview of what the district does. So as Rob mentioned, his will be very targeted on the master plan, and we have not received a response from either group on our outreach to see if they're interested in hearing broader.
Okay. Just are these, and Mike, feel free to answer, are these open to the public or can we just go?
The sponsor group it's a public entity. I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Hunsaker about the Property Owners Association group.
The meeting is for members only, but we can invite speakers who can only attend during the presentation time.
Okay. Well, it sounds like our staff has reached out and haven't heard anything, so if you're at a meeting and you hear people.
Our members have been.
Let's not have a dialogue.
Rather ill.
Well, if you hear an interest, let them know that we're willing.
We'll have a meeting in June, probably.
Super, thank you.
And just to add, if Mr. Scholl is going to be representing the district at the sponsor group, that may conflict with when we wanted to present the item to the board next. So we'll have to coordinate those two activities. Because we were talking about the second meeting in April, right? Which would be the third Wednesday.
That would be, I'll be going next
Also,
week.
just next week? Okay,
Yes.
not the one there. Okay, I apologize.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I do have two requests to speak. One is from Diego Flores.
Good afternoon, Diego Flores, Latham and Watkins, representing the Golden Door. We actually have no other comments today. I just wanted to thank the staff for their responses to our very pointed questions, and we'll be seeing you guys at the next hearing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the other speaker is Mr. Hunsaker.
Mike Hunsaker. We are not going to get all the water that we've been promised. And this has not been covered. Most of our water comes from the Colorado River. And recent court cases and the Bureau of Reclamation have indicated that 1.4 million acre feet now belong to the Indian tribes. This has not been accounted for in any master plan at all. Furthermore, the Bureau of Reclamation is planning on giving the Indians up to 2.9 million acre feet of water to the Indians. They are free, according to their future plans, to charge us for that water until they can develop the infrastructure to use the water themselves. And the 2.9 million acre feet is more than the entire state of Arizona gets. They've already sued the San Diego Water Authority for the right to have the water paid for by the district that was sued to the Indians directly. But if they develop their infrastructure, then that water disappears. Furthermore, there's going to be a change in contingency plans for shortages, and the Bureau of Reclamation is planning to call one probably January 1st, 2020, according to their recent operations plan. The 2014 cutoff date, I can understand the desire to have a cutoff date, but originally the master water plan was supposed to be done in August 2016. So everything is getting a little out of date. As far as SANDAG, it's recommending and projecting a 1.4 per year growth rate. We've been averaging in the state about 3%, and it has resulted in chronic infrastructure deficits that we are dealing with today. I welcome the opportunity to discuss further between the sponsor group, and so we can hammer this out and get that resolved on the calculations. I do sort of wonder why they would use discretionary events on specific apartments in variance with their water supply assessments. I also understand that the water supply assessments.
Mr. Hunsaker, please wrap it up in your next
Okay.
sentence.
No, I'll wrap it up right there. I've
Thank
got
you.
so much more to go to.
Thank you very much.
But I do recommend that we have more public outreach before a decision is made.
Thank you very much. With that, no other questions, comments? We're going to move into a closed session, I do believe.
Not related to this item, but yes.
Right. So we're going to end this agenda and then
There's no
reopen
action
it?
required up here.
Oh, okay.
On this
All right. So,
Do you want me to make the announcement?
Motion to go to closed session.
yeah, move to close, go to closed session.